So I am, as Jeff said, the chair of the music department at the conservatory, and I actually am an oboe player by trade. So I play professionally as well as teach. And so my job at the conservatory is kind of a split between administrative things and also doing a lot of performing and teaching. Spent a lot of my career in higher education, teaching and administering as well. So my whole life has been this, which is great. I feel really fortunate and blessed to be able to spend most of my time teaching other people about music. And so that's a little about me.
And to get into, thank you, Dr. Murray, and to get into the procedures just about how to do the discussion and help everybody out, Elaine, you actually kind of showed us how to do it by raising your hand. Would you mind kind of telling us how you did that? And that's really what we want to use for our discussion. If you guys could keep yourself muted. And then
I didn't raise my hand, I was saying hi.
Oh, okay, misread.
And then this is the thumbs up.
How do you do
Say
that?
hi because Alice had her hand up, so I was like clapping to Alice. Well, how do you do that? You do that in the chat, don't you? I don't know. Is that in the chat? Let's see. How do I raise my hand?
So yes, when you open the participant pane on your individual Zoom page, you will see that you will be able to actually raise your hand or request to be unmuted or unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just for discussion.
Just like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was it right there. We saw you, but now it's gone. But yeah, so if you guys could keep yourself muted for the duration of the conversation, and then if you do have a question, raise the hand, or you could type your question in the chat on the side. Either way is okay, but we just want to try to have an orderly way of doing that. So if y'all are ready, let's get into our Q&A with Dr. Lauren Murray. I'm very excited. I'm going to clap for this first ever partnership pop-up events. Okay, so we felt maybe a good way to start with our discussion today would be to ask, how do we engage in music? What are some ways that every day we hear music, we are just surprised by music, and maybe we all as a group could start to brainstorm that for our conversation. How does music impact and find us in everyday life?
And I think that that's an important question to ask when you're starting to talk about any musical topic, because we're inundated with music every day, and a lot of it we're so used to hearing that we sort of, don't even realize it's happening. So I love for people to be able to think a little bit about what did I hear today, and did I even notice that, and why did I hear that, kind of a question. And it's amazing sometimes with young students the things that they are hyper aware of, and the things that maybe we don't notice as adults as much as younger students.
I found it interesting. We're starting a new program this summer, half day. Camps are going to be kind of iffy for a lot of us for our summer camps. And actually, we're doing a mixed clay and play. So 3 days of clay and 2 days of ukulele and music theory with an instructor. And when I was interviewing her, she brought about something she kind of stealth teaches in her music programming, but about how music evokes emotion in us, and it actually has been shown to release oxytocin, and that's the feel good and in our brains and things. And she was saying, why do you get with friends and you put your arm around them and you sing a song and you feel good, and some of the things I actually went back and turned on the Zoom. I said, would you mind if I record this? Because this is value proposition for why a parent should want to put a child into this little 10-person camp for half day. And that to me, it clicked, because I don't have any musical ability. I am pure administrative. Have no no talent whatsoever, no ability. And of course, some will argue, yes, you just need to learn how. But it does make me feel good, and I like the whole range of music. I mean, I'm all over the place. You never know what I'll pull up on my iPad. I'll be bouncing around and singing. So I think the psychosocial. I know from my background for years as a hospice executive director what the healing arts can do in music therapy, and so it's incredible. Really, the depth. People don't think of it. A lot of people just think it's entertainment, and it's just there for me to have fun with. But it's much more than that. It's deeper than that, and that's what we're hoping these couple week half-day classes are going to teach these young students.
And I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to watch any of the video, but one of my examples was, when I'm in the grocery store, I am that person in the grocery store walking down the aisle, whistling along with whatever music is playing. And I have a lot of people looking at me like I'm crazy. And because a lot of people don't even notice that the music is on in the grocery store. And so I love to ask students that as well. Why is that music playing in the grocery store? I mean, what is it about the grocery store that would make you want? And so even from a marketing standpoint, children are very astute to those kinds of questions as far as it makes you want to stay there longer, and maybe if you stay there longer, you'll buy more stuff, you'll spend more money. And so then the conversation can go into, well, what's the right kind of music to play to make people want to stay longer? Because you can't play everybody's favorite greatest hits, because you're going to have all kinds of people in your store. So you've got to pick music that actually has sort of kind of overriding characteristics that affect you emotionally, and that affect you in a way that is just pleasing, sort of in a back of your mind kind of a way. So I think that's an important thing to understand about just generally understanding music and studying music even a little bit, is that we do use it in so many ways, and it's important for us to use it in a lot of different kinds of ways.
And Chris brought up the great example of emotion, and Dr. Marie, you were going into that as well, as far as putting us in a certain emotional state, a certain mode of feeling. And I want to give you guys an example that's probably very well known. It's from Star Wars. It's the Imperial March for Darth Vader. And I want us all to listen to this and try to think about the emotions that this makes us feel. But more importantly, how does it make us feel about this certain character? Why would the composer John Williams create such an iconic song to be identified with Darth Vader? So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen for us all. And we're going to listen to this as long as and just try to think about how it makes you feel about Darth Vader. All right, mine's still playing in the background. I gotta stop it. Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. So let's just maybe start with some one words. So if we were doing something like this with students, with individuals at our sites, right? We could play them any style of music, or maybe something like Star Wars that's very iconic, and come up with some adjectives, some tone words that would describe how that music makes us feel about that character. So what are some words you guys can imagine there?
Imposing.
Militant.
Mm-hmm.
Doom.
Yeah. Kind of like it's the big deal. Like this is a big, important.
Mm-hmm.
You're ready to
like
fight
ready for
against
battle.
something.
I think we had two going at Irish. Were you saying something?
I was saying it seemed like it's one of those I'm ready for battle type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You remind me
Wordy.
Shostakovich Symphony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very regal. So I think then taking that, all very valid ways to think about this iconic song, how do we get there? How do we feel that way? Why do we feel that way? And so I think that's where we can kind of bridge the discussion of what makes us feel imposed, regal, intimidating. What about the actual music itself is making us feel that way? So maybe Dr. Murray, you could kind of help us of taking something that's going to hook us like that. How do we bridge that into instruction that's very basic but also engaging for students?
And I think just using the cheat sheet that, thinking about just those words, those simple words that we have, going first with the harmony, or that, the melody and the harmony together, da, 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 da. It's not a super happy kind of a scale that's being used. Mm-hmm. And, I think when you're talking about music like this, it's hard sometimes to find words that are understandable without getting too musically technical. And so I think it's important to really think about the main melodic idea, the kind of what you come away with singing, if you had to sing the melody. Mm-hmm. And so the choice of notes in that melody itself creates some of that feeling in us. And the thing that's even more interesting to think and talk about is, why is that? Is it, the kinds of music that we listen to culturally and the kinds of music that we might hear in the movies that we watch and the TV that we watch, we have been sort of conditioned to react to these kinds of harmonies and melodies in an emotionally particular way. Now, if someone in this group is a native from another country that uses a different set of scales, like some perhaps from Asia, some from somewhere in India, somewhere in Africa, you may have a completely different reaction to this melody, because this particular kind of harmony and melody is drawing on you kind of as a Western music listener to have those emotional reactions. So I think that just sort of talking about what that music melodically reminds you of. And then the other thing I think that's very striking right away is the idea that it's a march, and so when we think about marches, you have a couple of different, so for me, that's where the military part of it comes out. I mean, I think about military bands or parades that I have seen, and even if I'd never seen the movie, and I still would have this picture in my head of people marching in a group together, and then that kind of march beat, that kind of that drive combined with that melody that maybe isn't so friendly sounding, that's gonna make me think, okay, somebody's coming to get me, there's an army coming after me. So I think that those kinds of, just putting those sorts of pictures together in our mind, using those things, help us a lot.
Words were regimented and structured. It was
yeah.
And when you describe the music not being a music person, but that that is very regimented and structured music.
Right.
I was going to see Dr. Murray, if we could do one more example, maybe on the opposite spectrum of the Imperial March. I was thinking maybe the Dave Brubeck song, or unless you had another example, what might be a good contrast to what we just heard?
Well, actually, I had dropped in at the very bottom of that list, Lux Aeterna,
Okay.
which is a piece. It's a contemporary piece, and it's completely. Well, let's listen to it for a second. It will have less reference to it. So yeah, at the very bottom of the list.
Okay. Is it this one on 17 right here? Let's see. Yeah, I think there's only 17 on this. I could just.
Oh, you probably saved it before. I dropped it in there this afternoon. So,
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I mean, well, how about just because I think sometimes we have such a reaction to. Can we listen a little bit to the Penderecki?
Yeah, which number is that?
Scroll up. That number 6.
Number 6. Okay.
Yeah, it's really loud.
Okay, so kind of do the same thing. Think about the emotion that this creates and try to understand why. Okay. It's animated too. All right.
Yeah, and there's about almost a minute of text here at the beginning if you want to scroll forward a little tiny bit. Or 30 seconds, I think. Or you can just let it run if you want.
We'll just. Oh, I went all the way. Oh my gosh, this is scaring me.
Yeah. Start right there. Right there.
Oh wow. I'm gonna need counseling. Okay, I was. That's like how long can you last? That's a real test.
It does change a lot.
Alice has a. You could last, Alice.
So would that be considered atonal? Okay, just needed to make sure.
I believe that would be considered torture. And
Well,
I agree.
Sensory
Torture.
overload.
but
Sensory overload, yeah.
what's it useful for?
That is such a horror film sound of when you're being like chased down a hallway with someone with a knife and you just know they're coming for you. It's just intensely suspension waiting for something to happen. And you know it's not good, whatever it is.
Yeah, you think of the film Psycho. It's like
I definitely was terrified.
Well, just so you know, it was used in a lot of the score of The Shining. So it was, but it was not originally written as a horror movie film score. It was originally written as it's a threnody to the victims of Hiroshima. So it's written to depict the horrors of war and what people saw after an atomic bomb exploded in the middle of a giant city. And so I think once you know that, your initial reaction of hearing that music is very unpleasant and you don't want it for very long. And then imagine how you would feel if you had to walk down the street in Hiroshima, in 1969 after that happened. Or, sorry, not 69. That I think using music to depict that kind of feeling is perfect for that, because there's almost no other way. I mean, even if you've seen pictures of that, it's still if the pictures are silent, it's horrifying. But if you accompanying it with some kind of just something that really brings out those emotions, it's really hard to bear. It's hard to endure for very long.
So I guess one follow-up question with that is, why would a musician, composer make people want to feel that way, so uncomfortable? It's, I believe it's dissonance. It's not pleasant to listen to. And you explain this great historical context, but if I give this to students, they're going to be like, that's not music. There's no melody, there's no rhythm. So how do you kind of defend the artistic mindset behind creating something like that?
Well, I mean, music isn't necessarily, how do we define music?
Mhm.
What is it exactly? Music isn't defined by something that sounds good, because what sounds good to me sounds bad to someone else. And depending on where you're from and what kind of music you're raised with, you may find timbrally something that's much more appealing than someone else might. Now, this particular kind of music came out of a time when composers were not looking to make people feel good. They wanted to make a political statement. They wanted to get at you. They wanted you to think. Larissa, I think you mentioned the Darth Vader tune reminds you of Shostakovich. Same kind of thing. Shostakovich was politically trying to get some ideas across and making people think, and doing it in a way that was a little more seductive. The Darth Vader tune isn't as hard to listen to. It's kind of exciting. Maybe it's a little appealing. This Darth Vader, maybe he's not such a bad guy. He sounds. This music is really.
Had a melody.
That's right. So, but there's some underlying scariness there. Pendergrass, he tells you it's bad, bad, and so I think the idea of using music to convey ideas. Not all of our ideas are happy and light. We have sadness, we have horror, and so there are times we want to use music to convey anger. We want to convey desperation. And so it's not always going to sound beautiful. And that's okay. It's still music. It's still, you're still composing sounds and putting them together to create something. And so I think that's when you're thinking about music, that's the important thing to remember, is that
To create emotions.
That's right. That's right. And not all emotions feel good.
We kind of live in a landscape of sound. Sound is one of the first of the senses that is developed when we come into the world. Sound is something that we respond to in every moment of our lives, even when we're asleep, so that we're really connected to sort of this canvas of sound, and it does begin to align itself naturally in our lives. I mean, it's like the difference of walking down the street and hearing somebody jogging and hearing the sound of their footsteps and knowing that, oh, well, this is somebody who's about to pass by me. And so, we emotionally or we energetically respond to that. Someone who walks with heavy feet, the closer they get to us, it denotes, and it aligns us with our emotions. So it's one of the first senses to develop, and it's one of the last senses that actually leave us when we make our transition from life. So we live in sort of a landscape of sound, and so oftentimes the artist approaches it in that way. If you looked on the side and saw the violins and the viola and the contrabass, it would be hard to distinguish those individual sounds on the palette that he chose to create. But that palette is what created that tension that spoke to us on another energetic level. I think that's one of the beauties of the utilization of sound. It can be a melodic representation to take our hearts and our minds one place, or it can be a landscape that really kind of moves us beyond, to another place of feeling that is very much emotionally aligned. I think also one of the things that's really interesting is that when we experience music, like for instance, this was born out of a sense of Hiroshima, right, which was a dynamically hurtful time in our lives. you know, so what's happening to us socially in our lives oftentimes, you know, it's difficult to separate the two. You know, it's really, really great when music can be a soundtrack for our social consciousness.
Fred, that's interesting about the sound. You know, and you talk about it being one of the last to leave at end of life. That is a known thing in hospice. But what I also, and we encourage families to talk even if they're not responding. But early on, I was at McDonald Training Center for Developmentally Disabled Adults. We had a sensory support unit that we developed. So they were not only developmentally disabled, but they were visually and hearing impaired. But the vibration was also something that they could use to soothe them, soothe the clients, because many times they expressed self-destructive behavior because of their frustrations of not being able to see or hear. And it amazed me that they couldn't hear the notes of the music, but they could feel the vibrations and the pieces of it. And so you're right, that same that you don't see the person walking behind you in the heavy footsteps, but you're not only hearing it, you're feeling it, you're sensing it. And it's like here they have no senses to speak of that we would call senses. And so it was just powerful. So decades later, when I started getting exposed to the music therapies and things for healthcare, it all clicked. It's like, my goodness, it's such a gamut of our whole being. It's interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think another really interesting thing to think about with this music is too, and maybe a longer conversation when you start talking about music from other cultures, is if none of us had ever seen a horror movie before or anything, we weren't avid watchers of any kind of television, would this music affect us in that same way? Because if you think about the kinds of TV and movies we've been watching since birth for all of us, we've been conditioned visually and aurally to relate certain kinds of sounds with certain kinds of sights. And so once you start thinking about, okay, why do I think of it that way? So that's what the other piece, the Lux Aeterna, is a piece by Ligeti, which is also very, very, very dissonant, but it's sung, it's all voices, and it's very soft and much more ethereal sounding. And so not any less dissonant, but it affects you. It sounds, the timbre of it is very different. And so when you start thinking about how much of my reaction to this is culturally conditioned, how much of this is kind of what I've experienced and what the music that I listen to around me and creating my reaction to it. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Two thoughts, just, because I want to try to transition into the time where the partners, you guys can ask some questions. So if you haven't had a chance to ask any questions or think about how you can apply it to your site, I would love to give you all that opportunity. But a couple things I'm hearing from the discussion here is just how much cultural studies that could be done based on music alone, diving deep into history as well, and using that as an avenue to understand the historical context that art is created in. And so I see a lot of great opportunities to connect it that way, but also the emotional growth, getting students, getting individuals aware of their emotions, being present in the moment, I think could be a great bridge to understanding why they feel the way they do and helping out with some of that emotional awareness. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak to either of those areas, but those were just a couple practical things I came up with while you all were speaking.
I will say that one of the things that we're involved in at the Straz Center is we work closely with the Institute for Art and the Mind at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And I am actually on a panel, and Alice is on a couple of panels that explicitly talk about music as a real modality for supporting mental health, mental health wellness, aligning with other forms of medical modalities to enrich the healing component of an experience that someone really is involved with. And certainly one of the first questions that's asked when kind of endeavoring into that space is, what do you love to hear? What's the music that's relative to you? What culture, of what culture might you come from? What are some of the cultural frequency nuances that you align with? So I think all of that is really relevant, and there's a much broader conversation happening both on a national and an international level in terms of understanding music and the role that music plays in terms of both wellness and also in terms of being a supportive modality for helping people to regain a sense of both physical and or mental well-being. It's really, really interesting to enter in those conversations and to hear and see how many different modalities of music are utilized on a palette of helping to bring a sense of calm or a sense of peace to people when they're going through some type of a medical procedure. And again, as Dr. Lawrence says, some of it is representative of just a cultural thing. It's like, this texture music is supposed to make me feel good. This texture music is not an external experience, it's an internal experience. I go inward. And so we've been taught those kinds of things. And even if we don't know a lot about a particular culture, there are forms of Eastern music that we've been told, and we've been patterned to understand this is meditative, this is whatever. So it's really interesting, the relationship between the mind and the ears and what we're taught. It's really fun and exciting and really great from an institutional standpoint of view to be involved in a conversation about art, music, dance, and theater and its healing components. I think some of that is inspired by the fact that COVID-19 has presented an opportunity for us to step back and take a look at what can we create in our environments to calm us and to bring us to a place of feeling better in a world of uncertainty. So it's pretty interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
For us here at We Rock, we notice a lot with the kids that come in. We play music for them here in the gym while they play, but we notice it helps them kind of, you can see their sensory, they just kind of come together and melt. It helps equal them out. And it also allows them to really express themselves through music or movement and dance and kind of connect with their own inner body where maybe they are not normally able to. And it's really a beautiful thing to watch when you see them hear certain music or start to do certain movements with the music where they're able to actually feel confident in themselves and able, to express themselves without being judged.
Laura, would you share, I don't know if you're a participant, but the lady that attends who is blind, visually impaired, do you recall her in your program?
Yes, she loves the class. It's great, and and she's able to. I think one of the really nice. It's funny because a lot of times when I do these lectures, I use a video. So we listen, but we're also watching. But we're not doing that there. We're just doing it all orally, and I'm just playing excerpts. And the class is really much better that way because it forces them to just listen with their ears and not, project ideas by watching the video. And so she has a lot of really interesting insights to what specifically she's hearing. And sometimes she's hearing a lot deeper than we are because, she's just used to relying on her ears so much more than we are. And so it's pretty cool to have someone in the class that can contribute in that way because she hears very specific things and has questions based on those things that she's hearing. So it does add a really cool dynamic to the class.
I've heard some lively conversation. You probably don't know. You think I'm up there in the office, but I'm listening in and watching. You see me pop my head in, but it does get some lively conversation with you, and I think it challenges the others in the class. To go, I didn't really hear it that way, or I didn't really, but I know it means a bunch to her to be able to participate.
There are several characters in that class, so it's very interesting conversation.
We're South Hillsboro, that's us.
Our time is dwindling down. I do want to honor that. So
Larissa's raising her hand.
Larissa, yes.
I'm not going to be too long. I just wanted to tell you a short story. I'm from Estonia, and if you go to internet 1999, it's a year when Estonia separated from Soviet Union. And it was not, of course, very easy. And it was first a republic, the smallest in the Soviet Union, who actually decided to do it. And everyone was expecting kind of something bloody happened, because the Russians, they were all over the tanks and, these machines, and they were still in Estonia. And it was scary. But you know what Estonians did? If you go to internet, you will find out singing revolution. Singing revolution. What Estonians did, they stand up all over Estonia, they hold their hands all over Estonia, everywhere, and they were singing, and they didn't let anybody, touch them. And they were singing Estonian old songs, very famous, and Estonia has very deep singing culture. Like in Estonia, nobody asking, where are you singing? Are you singing? Everyone will ask, where are you singing? Because whole family sing somewhere. A lot of courses. Every year we have festivals and, all of the Estonia. But it was huge impact on politics when whole people stand up, they hold hands next to these scary machines, and they were singing, holding hands. And they won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Singing revolution. If you go, you'll find this story longer.
I'll look it up.
Thank you for sharing that, Larissa.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And oh, go ahead, Dr.
Before we go, Jeff, I did want to just mention about the piece, the music that's at the end of the playlist, several pieces that are the same. It's the same piece with different instrumentation playing them. A lot of my class, when I go into sort of a one-off situation with a lot of outreaches, that's one of the things I love to do, is I love to take different versions, like you mentioned the Brubeck. So there's the Brubeck, the video, and then there's the newer one with, it's got different instruments playing on it. It's very surprising. And I love to have the students listen to one of the versions and maybe draw a picture that comes to them about what they're hearing. And then I like to play the second version and have them modify their picture, maybe with a different color crayon, or in a different, if they can add to the story or something. But that is an incredible way to get even really young students really listening and kind of internalizing what that music is telling them and how it's speaking to them. And they kind of create it into a visual picture. So if you don't find any other way to be able to use kind of the technical aspect of this information, those kinds of things, finding, that's one of I'm fascinated with different versions of different pieces and how people rearrange music for different instrumentation. But it's such a fun activity for students, for anybody of any age, to listen to a composer's take on one version of it, and then maybe another composer, or maybe the same composer's take on the exact same piece. So you'll see a lot of them will have the same title, but it's totally different instruments playing, and it's really fun. It's a fun activity to do. So.
And I loved how in the lecture you spoke about the color of music, thinking about the shades and the tones, and that just connects the visual art element to it and connects our imagination. So I love your ideas of bringing out crayons to color to the music as you do it. With that, were there any other questions? I would love to talk for years and years. We can all get coffee and stay up to 1 if you'd like to. But Dan did join us. We want to give Dan an opportunity to say hi if he's willing to do so, so you all can meet Dan, and he can tell us where he's from. I don't know if he's available there.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Okay. You know what?
I don't. Okay. We're gonna let Dan be for a second. Okay, that's Dan. Yeah, he's from Weinberg. So thanks for joining the call there. So to transition a little bit to the future, on June 4th, we will be holding another partnership pop-up with Dr. Murray, and it's going to transition into our world music focus. And so the hope with this one was just to get some basic bearings around music and how to connect it in a very general way. But as Dr. Murray already mentioned, we want to kind of take what we're familiar with here in the West and try to connect it to different cultures and understand how sounds represent the cultures that they're created in. So we'll be doing that on June 4th, same time on a Thursday at 4:30. So keep a lookout at your emails for that conversation. And just kudos, thumbs up. I know some people left us, but thank you all for discussing. One of our biggest desires is not just us as the Straz talking to you, the partners, but partners sharing with each other. So I really love that you guys were able to share about your personal experience and from your own sites as well, your own site experience. That's what we want with these pop-ups, is for you guys to connect as partners as well. So thank you for doing that today. I really appreciate it. So yeah, that's the, I had a good time. Does anyone have any final thoughts or?
I was just going to say that these are also open to your constituents. So it's not just like our site contacts. If you feel comfortable enough that the different topics Jeff will be emailing out are open to your families, please feel free to send them the registration link. The only reason we have the registration link is to protect people's privacy so that we can lock the Zoom calls from Zoom bombing. But outside of that, we would love for you guys to share this content during our new normal.
I'm tempted to ask Fred to sing, but I don't know. He's been singing the whole lately. I mean, Fred, this is about music.
Can you sing us out?
Can you sing us out, Fred?
Sing us out, okay. Man, see, that's what happens, when you're a singer, you end up doing that. There's a magic thing about music, something that we just can't explain. We feel it on the inside in our heart, and sometimes we feel it in our brain. But we've learned from Dr. Lauren that there's a vibration that we connect to because of what we've learned as we're finding what we and who we want to be. So to our partner friends, I hope we'll meet again and continue this journey of wonderful music. Come back and be with us again.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Take care, Dr. Lauren. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Lauren.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Bye.